welcome. I am so glad y'all are here with us today. For those I have not met, I am Stephanie Davis, the program manager here at the Family Enterprise Center at Kennesaw State University, where we provide education, connection, and support to family business leaders. We host panel discussions, workshops, peer groups, and webinars just like this one, all designed to create space for honest conversations about what it really means to lead and grow a family business. Today's topic is one that doesn't always get talked about openly. We often focus on succession, continuity, preparing the next generation, but sometimes leadership also means recognizing when stepping away is the right choice. Leaving a family business can be one of the most complex and emotional decisions a person makes. It touches identity, loyalty, legacy, relationships, and a lot of times even grief. But leaving does not mean failing. It doesn't mean rejecting your family. It doesn't mean breaking ties. In many cases, it means choosing clarity, alignment, and long-term health for both the individual and the business. Today, we're fortunate to hear from three individuals who have navigated that decision thoughtfully and with integrity. It's important to note that their perspectives are from a non-controlling position, so they did not have to choose whether to sell the business, close down, or pass the business on. But the impacts of stepping away from a family business are felt no matter the role. So let me introduce today's guests. Jacqueline Jensen spent more than 15 years leading within her family's business before exiting, and today she serves as a professional EOS implementer, helping leadership teams build clarity, accountability, and healthy businesses. Leslie Oob left her grandfather's construction business while also helping sunset her family's other business, an agritourism venture in which she served as president. She is now director of landscape architecture at Pond and Company. Adam Hatcher worked in his family's multi-generational business for 13 years in multiple executive roles, and today he leads 21 Clear, advising family businesses on how to move forward while staying together. So I am grateful to each of you for being willing to share your stories so candidly. Today's webinar will operate a little bit like a panel discussion, so I will ask some questions, but I will be monitoring the chat. So if anyone in our audience has questions, please put them there and we'll cover those towards the end of the conversation. All right, let's start at the beginning. Jacqueline, I'll begin with you. When you first joined your family's business, was that always your plan? And what or who brought you into the company and what did you love about it?
Hmm. So I don't know if it's the same for many, but first, thank you, Stephanie, so much for having us today. And for those attending, I know Adam and Leslie and I are excited to share our perspective. And so to answer that initial question, Stephanie, I think for me, I was raised in the family business. So dinner conversations generally revolved around the family business. And at the time, that was in oil and gas. And so I was talking and learning about taxes and payroll and accounting and ops before I knew how to drive. And so it was just kind of ingrained in this is what we do as I grew up. Um, and then at 18, I made that decision. I wanted to kind of become my own person. Um, so I left. I grew up here in the Alpharetta area. I left Georgia and I went to school in Florida and I spent 4 years growing and developing and figuring out who I was and wanting to take leadership on in a role outside of family business. So for me, I had those 4 years to grow a little bit. And I was bound and determined that I was not going to work in the family business. I wanted to make my own way. I wanted to create my own path. I wanted to find the things that brought me joy, and oil and gas wasn't it. So I was not going to work in the family business. However, after graduating, I guess maybe like 4 or 5 months after graduating, my stepfather came down to Florida and visited me, and I'd heard through the grapevine that he was a little unhappy with my choice to not work in the family business. And when he came down, he made that very clear. And so my entrance back into the family business came from a place of wanting to honor my family, not wanting to disappoint. Maybe it's some feelings of obligation as like, this is the right choice for you. So just kind of felt a little pressure to move back to Atlanta and work in the family business. So to clearly answer that, my stepfather was the entrepreneur in my family. He raised me. He brought me back into the family business. And I'm so grateful for the opportunity. I was brought into a position of kind of an executive leadership trainee position. So I learned kind of every facet of the business and just business organization and operations from a standpoint that and otherwise, a typical 22-year-old would not have had the opportunity to learn from. So I'm grateful for that.
All right. Leslie, how about you? You want to tell us how you joined your family's business?
Sure. For me, it was a safety net. I graduated from UGA with a degree in landscape architecture, went straight into practice, was licensed in a couple of states, and had a almost 12-year career. And then the economy crashed in 2008, 2009, 2010. And I watched the demand for landscape architecture basically evaporate. And I was laid off from two jobs, um, waited tables for a year, did some freelance to keep things going in the household. But ultimately, when my grandmother retired from the family business, they offered me her spot to be trained by her and to take over her duties. And that was precisely what my family needed. We needed steady income. We needed the flexibility that comes with working at your family's business. And I was grateful for it. And it was bookkeeping and payroll and taxes. And I drew trees for a living and had not a good foundation for that role, other than I deeply cared for my family and I knew they had my back when I was in crisis. So it was not the plan. And also, it was exactly the plan.
Yeah, that's awesome. Adam, tell us how you got started.
Sure. And hey, real quick, so it's gonna be hard for me all day to go after Jacqueline and Leslie. Y'all are awesome. But Stephanie gave me permission to ask everybody, hey, this is an interesting webinar to jump on. Jacqueline, Leslie, even listening to y'all, like they're echoes of your story, my story, and yours, and there are things that are going to be different. I am curious though. Here, where's the chat feature? Okay, it's right. Can we do this? Hang on. All right, right here. Take a second, if you would. Can you go, everybody, just go to the chat and write one reason you logged in today? What's something you hope to learn?
Mm.
I actually wanted to put Sean Lowry on the spot, Sean, and ask you questions, but Stephanie told me I wasn't allowed to do that. So Tiffany was next on my list, but but real quick, hey, I'll introduce myself. But y'all do me a favor, real quick. Even like Ken Hill, Oscar, Lori, I know y'all can't be on camera. If you can, just go drop in the chat real quick, and if you can type what you hope to learn, because my hope is that we can also make sure we touch those perspectives or ideas. So, Stephanie, thank y'all so much. Carol, to Kennesaw State. This is a phenomenal resource. My family's company in Kennesaw State actually go back to 1998. Our family's business is a staffing and recruiting company. My granddad started it with $500 and a rented roll top copier in 1973. It was a family business on day one when my grandmother went to work, and she left the company within a week. There were no rules, no guidelines on how you work together and how you argue. And she and my grandfather had an amazing argument that ended in him working alone for a time. But over that over that time, we scaled from $500 to almost $500 million a year from a regional local company to coast. I was there for 13 years. I joined as the general counsel. I was the general counsel, then head of corporate strategy, then head of corporate strategy and HR, which for any of y'all who are thinking of hiring family members, please don't do what my father did and give them the title general, even if it's general counsel, because it means you're going to end up doing everything. And though we grew, yeah, and though we grew the company, what was powerful for me is because I'm the oldest of three, I was able to work with my grandfather. So I actually reported to my father. I worked with my grandfather, my step uncle, my cousin, my brother. Um, I told people that as general counsel, I involuntarily committed my CEO to the ICU. And as head of HR, set my brother's compensation. So I've done a thing or two. And I never thought, Jacqueline, you and I are similar in this regard. I never intended to work there. My brother and sister are both incredibly sharp. They're younger than me. I went to law school, went to the University of Virginia, went to law school, practiced law for 3 years. And that's what I thought I would do. And I thought I would watch the company from afar. We kept business out of family gatherings. So I didn't have a lot. I interned there a couple of times in high school and college, but I didn't have much of a perspective. And I live in Augusta, Georgia. My wife and I, after 3 years of me practicing law, were looking to leave. And my father's had a lawyer, outside counsel, tell him, "You're about $100 million now. You should probably get a general counsel." And he asked me what I thought. And I said, "I think you should get one. Good luck. We're leaving." And I told him no. But then I went to lunch with three different people who were either third or fourth generation. They had at least 15 to 20 years each working in their family's businesses. And all of them said, "Adam, you are 29 years old. Your son is 6 months old and your wife has a job. And the company has a need beyond chief waiting for daddy to retire officer. And you're uniquely qualified to fit that need. Try it. Like, if it goes great, wonderful. If it doesn't go well, then in 2 years, you'll find your successor and your story is going to be, the family had a need. I stood up the legal function. I found the right person. And then I moved on with practicing law." But they said, if you wait to try it till you're 50, it has to work when you're 50. It doesn't have to work at 28 or 29. And I ended up loving it and loved the challenge.
Good advice.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah.
Love the challenge of scaling and growing.
Yeah. All right. So at some point, though, something shifted. So I'll swing it back over to Leslie. Was there maybe a moment or a gradual realization when you began to sense that staying might not be the right long-term path?
Yeah, of course, it's never one thing, right? It always has to be a confluence of things when it's family business, because that's the nature of family business. It's not just business, it's also personal, it's also identity, it's also relational. So it's not going to be just one thing. So I was not honest with myself from the jump, in that my intention was to go in there, learn all the processes, starting with bookkeeping and payroll, all the way through like estimating, execution, contract administration, all of it. Learn all the steps, learn all the roles, and ultimately, in years, be the generation leader that took over the family business. My grandfather was the first generation, my father was in the second generation, and I was in the third generation working in the family business. And so that was my secret goal that I wasn't honest with myself about and didn't talk to anybody in the family about. There was a point in time where it became clear that that was never the intention of the controlling generation. And it was not a direct conversation until it was. And I was part of a conversation where we all sat around the dining room table and talked about what it might look like for Generation 3 to take over the business. And it fell completely flat. We presented an exit strategy. We presented the business plan moving forward. We presented all of the challenges that we were prepared to retool and accept. And the leading generations couldn't see it. They could not see it. And that was not the moment that I was like, I'm out. But it was the first time I was like, oh, there may not be a path forward here. Then my husband's health changed, and his access to things like health insurance and all of that started to shift. And it became really apparent that a small family business that has higher health insurance premiums and less access to 401k benefits and those sorts of things were going to be items that I needed and would have access to, or at least decision-making power over if I had more authority in the business, but was not going to be available to me if I stayed. And so, I mean, those are some very practical things, but all of it is true. So it was kind of a gradual unveiling first to myself. And then I started having to have those conversations of this is shifting for me. And uh, and then I needed to check, with my dad. I had to have conversations with my dad that I never imagined having, like questions like, what would I need to learn, or what would I need to do for you to take me seriously enough to be able to take over the family business? And hear back from him, there's actually not anything. So that I had to gather some pretty tough data and be able to move into these clear conversations, first with myself and then with my family, as these different things shifted in the different areas of my personal life.
Yeah, tough stuff. Jacqueline, what about you? Was there a gradual realization, or was it a one moment in time when you were like, okay, time to go?
Yeah. So much, again, I think we'll see some through lines between Leslie and Adam in my story. And so some of what Leslie mentioned resonates deeply, and others is very different. So from my perspective, I mentioned initially we were in oil and gas. At the age of 28, we entered the hospitality industry. So a private country club. We acquired a private country club. And I was kind of tossed into this leadership position that I certainly didn't have the skills for and wasn't prepared for. And that's kind of how my career with the club went for years. It was, oh, throw her into this position, she'll figure it out. Throw her into this position, she'll figure it out. And by the age of 28, I was a general manager of a private club with 120 employees. And so gradually just getting kind of like sucked into it. And I think in a family business, for many, you want to make your parents proud, right? The emotional standpoint of that leading generation and second gen, like there's so much about me as I just wanted to make my parents proud, and hopefully earn their trust that I could lead and manage the business and people well. And then there's also this outside perspective of like, hey, I want to do a great job. I just want to be well respected in this position. And so that led me to I said yes to anything that was thrown my way. And yes, I will go figure it out. So for years, it was 70, 80-hour work weeks, 7 days a week, spinning my wheels in the business, trying to figure out how to do it. And the reason I was so committed, I mean, I think that there's an emotional side that all of it that probably resonates with anyone in family business. But the other commitment was that my stepfather had promised my brother and I won't leave you an inheritance, I'll leave you an opportunity. And so when we acquired the country club was our opportunity, and sweat equity is how we would earn it. And so I felt like that promise of a business is what was made, but we had to earn it. My brother bailed out pretty early, but I stuck with it for years. And so year after year, it was like, okay, it was almost like this dangling carrot out there, right? Like, if you just do a little bit more, if you just do a little bit more, this promise of this opportunity was out there. And to Leslie's point, she mentioned that safety net, right? Like, there is a safety net feel within a family business that, like, your parents are not only going to take care of you within the business, but they're going to take care of you because you're their child. And so there's a safety net feel that comes from it as well. So for me, it was about 12 years of those 70 to 80-hour work weeks. And then it physically was taking a toll on me. And at the time I was married and had 2 stepchildren and leading the family as well. And so I'm running the club, I'm running a family. And it was overwhelming, and you start asking like, this doesn't feel right. I feel a lot of things in my gut. I often like will point to my gut, because that's just where I feel things. So I'm like, is this opportunity has been promised, but at what expense is it worth it? And that was a question I asked myself for 5, 6, 7 years. Um, and eventually it came to fruition. My stepfather, I was pushing for those conversations, kind of like Leslie was. Like, I was searching out facts, like, okay, you've promised this, you've promised this. I've stuck with you. I've had your back. I've protected you. Um, I've been loyal, extremely loyal. Um,
Mm.
and at what point do we start moving succession planning forward? Because it doesn't happen overnight. And so he humored me for a little bit, and we would have some of those conversations to begin the succession planning process, and then we'd bail out of it. And so it was a couple of years of that. And so it was like just enough to keep me in the business and keep moving forward. But again, I just kept asking that question: at what expense is this worth it? And inevitably, it came to a head, and it became more obvious to me that he was not going to move forward with succession planning, with me as the successor, that there would be a different option. And at that point, it was pretty clear for me to say, okay, it's not worth it anymore. And I know we'll head into kind of how we approach that conversation next. So I'll leave it there and let Adam jump in.
Yeah, Adam, we'll bounce it over to you. What was there a defining moment or was it a gradual thing?
It's it's gradual. It's interesting, Stephanie. For everybody who's logged in, on behalf of Leslie, me, and Jacqueline, thank y'all. I have say I joined the family company in 2010. Been doing family business consulting about 2, 3 years now. This is the first time I've seen people openly willing to log into something like this and talk and also to participate. And if y'all have read the chat along the way, we have people that are onboarding family. We have people who are thinking of leaving. We're having people who are thinking of leaving because their life has to change or they need to go start something else. I bet you somebody has someone they need to off. I think someone had someone they need to offboard as well. Um, Here's the thing, Stephanie, I wish someone had told me when I started in 2010. All right. So 13 years in my own family's company, 3 generations. Y'all know that when you work in a family business, you get this magical ticket. And that magical ticket lets you talk to any other person who works with their family, no matter their revenue compared to yours, and you get to have really honest conversations. I've gotten to sit with people who are doing a few million top line to people valued at $30 billion dollars plus. And like me, Leslie, and Jacqueline, it's across industries as well. And Stephanie, I wish the day I had started, somebody said to me, you will meet families from all over. One day, Adam, you will end up doing this work and you will work with families and you will study families of all different spectrums. And there's one thing guaranteed when you work with your family. If one day you choose to work with your family, I promise you, in all my experience, research, and knowledge, one day you're not going to. Like, you're going to leave. It's going to be over one day. And Jacqueline and Leslie, I was listening to y'all, and it's interesting that we can get lost in that because it's your family. I mean, I grew up around the business and you start to think that you can start to think it's inevitable or there are no options outside of it. I still remember sitting with a second gen who they were trying to earn their way to the top job and they felt that their mother was just never going to retire. And I remember they said to me, yeah, but Adam, I'm trapped. I can't go anywhere. And two things happened at once for me. One, I knew what they meant. I know it can feel inevitable when it is your family's company, particularly depending on how much you've invested in it. But also, I had to say to him, no, you're not.
Mhm.
It's a job. Like, it's way heavier than that, right? But it is a job. And what was interesting for me, when I was in law school, uh, and as happens in family companies, this happened out of nowhere. My father sent a letter to me, my brother who was in college, and my sister who was in high school. And it said, I don't know if the Lord's ever going to call you to come to the family company, if you're ever going to feel it's a calling on your life. But if so, these 5 things need to be true before you can join the company. And for him, now this won't be everybody else's list. And hopefully this is helpful. Somebody said that they were on board and a family member. And this is specific to the company and where it was at the time and the type of clients and the industry. But he said you need to graduate from high school, college, graduate degree, work somewhere else, get a promotion, and your personal beliefs have to be aligned with Christian values because a lot of the core values of our family's company line up with Judeo-Christian values. And so what he was trying to do was make sure that you were on an upward trajectory and you aligned with the core values of the business. That's got nothing to do with are you a good lawyer qualified to analyze a corporate risk profile, right? So it was family hiring criteria before joining. But what was Stephanie, what was important about that to leaving is it made joining a gradual process.
Hmm.
And thus, it did 2 things. And I didn't realize the wisdom in it when it happened. I always knew and I talked about this when I was there. He said, Adam, I graduated from the University of Georgia on Friday and I went to work on Monday. The only person who ever gave me a raise was my dad. And sometimes I had to buy my raise from him. He
Ooh.
said, I want, he said, I want you, I want your siblings, I want any other family members to know that you have value beyond my eyes and you have options outside of this company. And when I was leaving, I actually went back ahead of this and I looked over. I still have my script from the call we had about 20 senior leaders on a Zoom call when we announced it. And I still have my script from it. Something I would recommend to anybody leaving. Write it down. And I told them something I don't think I'd ever told them, that because it was never guaranteed I would join, every single year I asked myself, and my wife and I asked ourselves, is this where we're supposed to be? It helped to differentiate from the company. It is so, you're going to ask us later about identity, Stephanie. Any smart thing, it sounds like I say, I promise it just made it a little less hard. like you can do everything you can to keep your identity separate from the company, and you're still going to over-identify it in the ways other people struggle to understand. But because it was not inevitable to join, I also always was refreshing the decision, is this the right thing? My father and I were actually really open about that in annual reviews. And I shared that with the senior leaders on the way out. It may seem like it's inevitable for a third gen to keep going, but it was a gradual process. And one thing for y'all that helped it to unfold in a chaos proof fashion, I wrote a book called The Chaos Proof Family Business, is these conversations evolve through family meetings. And Leslie, Jacqueline, I don't know if y'all had those, but I've probably got 20 years of family meetings. So not company meetings, not, family vacation meetings, but amongst those of us who worked in the business and the family members who owned the business. We did them annually and then we did them quarterly. And then there are times where we've done them more often. Like this question, Stephanie, is something we were forced to answer to each other in those meetings. As
I think
family
that's
members,
wonderful.
yeah,
I think
it,
that's great.
it was, yeah. So it was a gradual process, and that's part of how it unfolded.
Yeah. That's a great segue into our next little bit of a topic here because leaving a job is one thing, right? But leaving a family business is something else altogether. So, Adam, I'll keep it on you. What was the hardest part for you emotionally?
Oh, so you
Or could
brought the
be.
easy question to me. Okay. All right.
Yeah, yeah.
Thanks. Okay. So for those of you if you're hiring family, um, ultimately they are going to move on, you're going to move on, or you may have to help them move on. If you have not done this yet, if you have not left yet, or if you have not been responsible for a family member leaving. I want to put this on a continuum for you. I had, before I joined the family company, I think 11 different jobs for free pay or school credit. So that means 11, 12, 13 times I have left a job. So if you think about, if you can see me on the video here, I'm kind of splitting my fingers apart. Like on this side, on the right side, is that your right? Or I don't know what that is to
Yeah.
y'all. Okay. Let's just say on the left side, on the left side of this line or this continuum, it's just like the normal emotional impact of moving from one job to another. I mean, sometimes it's great. You move, it's easy. You're getting a promotion, you're getting the job you wanted, you were in a temporary placeholder job, and now you're in a more permanent position. And there's a little bit of grief that can go with that. You may miss your coworkers, you may wish you had done it earlier, but it doesn't carry a lot of emotional weight. Then I want you to go to the far right side. So that was the left side. Go to the far right side with me. And that's the emotional impact of a profound family loss. This can be death, disability, estrangement. Okay, so on one end, you've got the emotional impact of a loss, but it's kind of transactional. And depending on how long you were in the job, it may move you more toward the middle. Depending on how much you were invested, how much of your lifestyle is caught up in it, leaving and moving or losing a job does carry an impact, whether it was your decision or not. But when you work with family, what we've done is we have mixed the unconditional nature of business with the conditional nature of family, which is what creates this emotional impact. And when you exit a family company, it's probably going to be on the right side. Even if you do it the right way at the right time. Stephanie, I met a guy. He had a successful career as a second generation CEO. He was second gen CEO. He saw his succession as a process. So he had his board involved, he had a consultant involved, and his son was next in line, but they were responsible for evaluating it. And it was, you would think he's kind of toward the left side, right? This is sounding intellectual and cerebral, and he's going to do it easily. Y'all, his consultant came back to him and said, good news, bad news. Your son is qualified to take over for you, and the board agrees with me. However, we also agree that you're a steamroller.
Mm.
And if you are still in place when your son becomes CEO, you will bulldoze your son, injuring the company and your relationship. So as of today, you are no longer CEO. Congratulations on your retirement. And just like that, he was out of the business. And we were talking about 2 years after that happened. He's like, Adam, it took me a year to get my head around it. Like all of a sudden, he went from thinking this and it was over here. And so your experience or your family member's experience, it's going to depend. Jacqueline, you were sharing some earlier, like, how much were you involved? How much it was part of your identity? How long have you been there? It's on a continuum. And yeah, it's on it, and none of us hit the same place. It can even be what you gave up. And so if you have one family, like when my cousin left and she's now CHRO of a Fortune 200 company. That's one exit. When somebody else leaves in any family company, it may be a totally different circumstance with a totally different impact. So I think it's important, Stephanie, please, if you haven't done this before, it's not just a cerebral decision.
For sure. Yeah. Jacqueline, do you want to touch a little bit on the emotional impact that it had on you when you left?
Yeah.
If you don't want to, it's
So,
okay.
no, absolutely. I'm happy to share it and I'll try and touch. I do want to piggyback off of what Adam said a little bit because we've really connected over this and just reiterate, because I saw it several times in the chat to reiterate the importance of clear communication, right? And anytime you're in a family business, Adam states it very well. I'm not going to state it the exact same way Adam does because I can't. Um, but the way I typically state it is when you're working in a family business, you're wearing three hats generally, right? You're a family member, you're an owner, if you have any equity. So even though I was not primary owner, I had equity in the business. And then you're an employee. You wear a seat, or maybe 2 or 3, depending on your family business, in the organization. And so to have appropriate communication and meeting cadence with each of those hats individually, and being incredibly clear about what hat you're wearing in the conversation, right? Is this a family conversation where I'm a family member and the dynamics of the family come into play with that conversation, right? Or are we having conversations as owners about the business and what the future of the business is and how to operate this business? Or are we having conversations as employees wearing our specific hat or hats sometimes in family business, and being really, really clear about what hat you're wearing when? Saying, it's been said many times, but I say it right, to be clear is to be kind. And so put on that hat, have the clear conversation, be open and honest, whether it's in the business or in the family circle, so that expectations align and that individuals can make decisions that are best for themselves and their families. And that's not necessarily tied to family itself, right? It's our own identity, because it's so common in family business to have as Adam said, to have your identity tied to it, especially when you come into a family business as a next gen or second gen, next gen, whatever that generation is. You grew up in it, and then you come into it so early. Oftentimes, I also love what Adam has researched and shares of like the importance of setting those boundaries of what's required before coming into a family business, and the idea of like, go work somewhere else, have them go work somewhere else for 5 years and learn what it's like to work without a safety net, and work for a boss who doesn't have the same love and admiration for you as your parents do, right? Like, go experience that. And then if you still want to come into the family business, let's talk about what other boxes need to be checked in order to do that. I think that that's a phenomenal way to approach it, but every family is going to be different. But tying back to identity, like for me specifically, I grew up in that family business. There was no clear lines between family, employee, or owners. Everything was just business for us. And then I was essentially felt obligated to come work for the family business. And that just became who I was, right? Every day, how can I make my parents proud? How can I lead this business well? How can I learn new skills? And how can I go home and take care of my family? And it just became so much of who I was. So when that decision came, where I ultimately decided to leave, I had so much peace because I pondered on at what expense is this worth it for so long. And when the outcome wasn't what had been promised, the decision to leave was so clear. And so I had a lot of peace in the decision, but I had so much work to do personally to kind of emotionally recover from that decision and figure out who I was and what I wanted to do and how I wanted to still serve people and take care of entrepreneurs, which I've now landed on my feet. But I was so tied to who I was in that family business. And I still catch myself some days thinking like, oh, I can do this, or I can go do, and I'm like, no, my stepfather's not my boss. Or no, I don't need to respond that way. I don't have to protect anyone, right? I'm not, still be kind, but
Right.
so it's a big adjustment. So I just go back to anyone in the chat who is at any point in this process of thinking about working for the business, working in the business, or thinking of bringing the next gen in or exiting the business. Like, just the importance of clear communication and beginning to work through what that will be like emotionally, for all parties involved, because there's the other dynamic of the leading generation too.
Yeah, that's really good advice. Leslie, I'm going to pop it over to you if you want to touch on the emotional aspect and then also how kind of dovetailing off of what Jacqueline just said. How did you approach that conversation, both at home and in the family business?
Sure. The hardest part emotionally for me was first admitting to myself that I was never going to succeed in taking over that family business and being able to detach from that identity. That was by far the hardest part. And I needed some tools to help me with that. I found a great resource in Emily P. Freeman, who teaches discernment and decision making. She wrote a book called How to Walk into a Room, and it is a guide for knowing when to stay and when to go, the art of knowing when to stay and when to go. And there's just some very practical, applicable discernment and decision-making tools that kind of guide you through knowing how to walk into a room. And when you walk out of the room you're in, you're oftentimes not walking into like a proverbial or metaphorical new room. Sometimes you're walking into a hallway, a transition time, and how to live well through these sorts of transitions if life were a series of rooms or a house. So I highly recommend that to help you get a handle on being clear with yourself, because you can't have those conversations if you can't have that clarity in your own mind. You don't have any language, and you've got to be able to, as Jacqueline said, be clear so that you can be kind to everyone. And so when I started to approach those conversations, it had to be for me just a statement of fact. I am feeling pulled towards landscape architecture again. And I am feeling the need for my own health insurance plan and 401k. And I don't think that these things are available to me here. So I am going to update my portfolio. One tiny thing. And I just said, I'm going to update my portfolio. And that's all I did. And then the next conversation was, I got some good feedback on my portfolio. I've noticed that in the job listings, there are a few things that would be a fit for me. I'm going to apply for these jobs. And it was step by step, very clear. I did not justify my reason for leaving other than to say, I need this thing. But before I could have any of these tiny step conversations or be clear with, I need this thing, so I'm going to take this tiny action, I had to be clear with myself. And that's how I approached the conversation. I had to have the conversation inside before I could have any of the conversations outside.
Leslie,
Awesome.
like, I just want to grab something you said like 3 minutes ago. That was all good. And there was something you said 3 minutes ago that really hit me. When you look at it and say, I just gotta like take it in for a second. Like when you say that's not gonna be me,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
I I wrote this recently. I said the chances, like I've heard forever people. We had a family consultant who talked about succession and family business succession, like handing off of a baton,
Mm-hmm.
and that sounds really good. And that's not what it's like.
Mm-mm.
It's not that, because what you have to do, it's like, um, y'all forgive me if this analogy, I know it's the Winter Games. I'm going to use a Summer Games analogy. It's like trying to get two archers from two different generations to shoot arrows and make them hit in the air. Because what are the chances that someone from the next generation is going to be ready at the right time for the job that the company needs at the exact moment or in the right time period where the controlling generation is ready to let go in the way that generation wants to be trusted and let go too? Y'all, that's really hard.
It
I
is.
mean, And I was sitting with a family recently who's going to wrestle with whether or not they need to bring in an outside executive, an outside CEO or a president, in part because the controlling generation's exhausted, but the next generation, by any objective standard, is not ready and won't be for a while.
Mhm.
And what I love about what you said, Leslie, is like when you make a decision like executive leadership in the company, your family has a choice, your family owners and employees. You got to put three sets of priorities in order. There's the clients, there's the company, and there's the family. And then there's kind of this ancillary of yourself. And every family's got to ask the question, whose interests come first? Like, if the family comes first, you just stick a family member in the top job. But if you believe the clients and the company come first, well, the market doesn't care that you're a family business. I remember one of the largest clients of our family company. I said, "What does it mean that we're family owned?" He's like, "What? You guys provide excellent service. What it means that you're family owned is when I'm mad, you show up." Like one of the family members comes, your competitor sends Vice President 36. Like you or your father, you guys show up. And I mean, Leslie, what you wrestled with is what I wrestled with. So I'm the oldest of three. My father was in his mid 60s when I led a restructure. We'd done about 40 million in acquisitions, and the company was way too hard to run. And so it was an incredible 2 year process where we restructured the company and we broke it down into two business lines. We were trying to run the new acquisitions like we ran the legacy business. It was just a mess. We needed somebody like Jacqueline, and we didn't have them. Sorry, Jacqueline, I didn't know you then. But I remember I was never going to retire the head of HR, Stephanie. In the best interest of a large staffing company that primarily focuses on global publicly traded manufacturers, I was able to come in and modernize the HR function, but my successor was actually ready. I recruited someone with global manufacturing experience and built an incredible network of specialized legal experts that a smart executive could use and could use as a proxy for a general counsel. And I remember as we were going through the restructure, sitting there and thinking, oh, I know it's in the best interest of the company. It's for me to step out of the way. And then you have that moment, Jacqueline, I think you know too, where you just go, what does that mean? and that's why these family meetings were so important. It gave me a safe place to say out loud, the time for me to let go of what I have is now, but I need space to think about what's going to be next because we had to sync up everybody's timing.
That's awesome. I love that you guys were able to have those kinds of discussions.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to make sure we kind of hit all the good points here. Um, Jacqueline, you did a great job telling us about how your identity was tied to the business. Um, I would love to know how that kind of evolved after you left.
Yeah. I think it still is. So I left a little over 2 years ago. And I spoke to someone else in the family business space. So again, a nugget, and not Leslie's pulled some great ones too. But one Adam said is like, once you're working in family business, you're like part of a cult, if you will, right? Like you're part of the crew. Come on in. Any of us are happy to be a resource to share. And so I recently connected with a good cult. Yes, Adam. And so I recently connected with someone who's about 2 years ahead of me, and it's still like, yes, I'm still recovering. It's still her story, and it's so interesting how her story and my story align, and are so similar. And so I know I'm still in this journey of disconnecting my identity from who I was for nearly 40 years, but who I was for 15, 18 years in the family business to who I am now. Um, so to answer the question of like what that journey's been, I think so much of who I was tied to people pleasing. So first making my family proud, which I've mentioned several times, like how do I make my stepfather proud? And then of course it's as a general manager of a private country club, I had 800 members who wanted to tell me how I was doing on any given day, and had an opinion on my performance. And so, I felt the need to show up and be professional and dress a certain way and speak a certain way. And I had lost who I was completely, like who just innately I was at my core, because I'd either been told for so long who I should be, or I tried so hard for so many years to make others happy, make others proud, take care of others. And so a lot of the initial first 6 months of leaving was kind of what is important to me. And Leslie, you pointed this out too. I think you took a much more intentional approach on reflection and probably journaling. And so I spent a lot of time journaling myself, but not nearly as intentionally, it doesn't sound, but of just like not who do I want to be, but who actually am I? What do I value? What's important to me? Where do I, how do I want to spend my time? What do I want to do next? And so I took 6 months and just pumped the brakes. I was fortunate enough that I left on pretty good terms. I had a severance. I took 6 months to breathe and figure out what I wanted before jumping into something else. And I'm also probably, as many are, generally a higher achiever. So I'm like, oh, that sense of accomplishment. What do I need to do? What I need to do, or what I needed to do, was just pause. And I just needed to sit and spend time with myself. So I've done a fair amount of that over the last 2 years, and just really, really dug deep into what do I value. So we talk often about core values for business, especially in what I do. Core values define the characteristics of how you expect someone to show up in your business. And I'm like, how do I expect myself to show up every day? Right. And where does that lie? Like, how does that feel in my gut where I feel things, or in my head? And am I exhibiting that every day? Am I being honest with myself? So a lot of it just went back to reflection, like Leslie said, and reconnecting with who I am, and hopefully why I was put here. And so now I'm pursuing that path and just continue to evolve and just kind of like, whew, take a breath and relax.
I think that's a very good point. It's okay to take a pause and really just write some stuff down. I love that. All right, we are coming up on time, but I did want to ask just a couple more quick ones. Maybe Leslie, you could take this one. If you could go back, would you handle anything differently, or you feel pretty good about how it all went down?
I like the way I left. I'm proud of the way that I left. It's important, however anyone decides to make any change in their life, that you do it from your own integrity, that you can go to sleep at night, look yourself in the mirror the next day, and know that you handled it the best way you could handle it, and you're proud of yourself for the way you did handle it. I am actually terrible at transparency. I would much rather manipulate the situation in a kind and, ethical way, of course. But I would much rather convince you that what I need is also what you need and not have to ask for it. So I'm really, really grateful for, I don't know, I can't take credit for it. I honestly feel like it was divine, the preparation that was available to me to, one, get ready to leave and then recover after I left. Another resource that I could throw out there if someone's looking for some tools in this is called The Next Right Thing. And it is also by Emily P. Freeman. That's what she does. She's in the discernment and decision-making process. The Next Right Thing is a tool that I would recommend to anyone who is looking for how to be proud of the way that they move about in the world. Because if you have that level of integrity, then I feel like you, no matter what happens or how difficult it is, you'll have that solid core of who I am at my deepest values, and that I moved out from there.
I think if I can grab, Yeah,
Yeah,
Stephanie,
please
if
go
you,
ahead. I
yeah,
was just going to say, I appreciated Leslie sharing those with me before we went on so that we can a great takeaway. But yeah, Adam, go ahead.
yeah. So Leslie, something you said and then that Jacqueline said that I loved. Like I was talking to a family recently, and this was something that somebody gave to me when I was stepping away as well. They said, I want you to imagine, and I told somebody this last week who was really struggling with their aunt and was thinking about leaving. I said, I want you to imagine there's a video camera behind you. And I want you to imagine it's going to film you for the next 8 months. And then in 6 years, we're going to show it to your sons. And they're going to see everything you said, everything you texted, everything you emailed, every family meeting y'all had. Are you going to be proud of how you showed up? Are you going to be proud of how you, because it's really hard depending on the situation, but will you be proud of how you showed up? I'm not talking about anybody else. And one of the things that helps people do that, Jacqueline, is what you said. Why start planning for family exits now? Because it's going to happen. The timing is not necessarily yours, even if you hired a board consultant. But Jacqueline, your story about an off ramp, family. I talked to a family recently because their lawyer called me and said, I need you to talk to my client. They called me for a severance agreement for a family member, and it was cheap. I'm just going to be honest. I said, and the first thing I said to him was, listen, you're going to give this family member, you want to, as best you can with the revenue and margin of your business, give them the chance to breathe. Don't upend their life. Give them a reason to call a financial manager versus an attorney. Because I've been called in that situation too. And that's the chaotic situation. So one, a camera following you around is a great visual for people when you start thinking about exiting a family member or exiting. But and it's interesting, Jacqueline. It was a brother and sister, and they had just bought their mother out. And so you would think that they wanted to work on, hey, let's put some governance around how we hire family, how we compensate each other. Do we run family meetings? One of them actually said, I want to create an off ramp because I don't know with mom gone if we're going to like each other. And y'all, it felt so early to plan for exiting, but you don't know when it's coming and you don't want to have those conversations live. So if you don't have family meetings, I would say do it. Bring a facilitator with you to get the ball rolling. And things like off ramp, camera following you around, like those are really helpful ideas to start getting in front of your family.
Great advice. Great
Yeah.
advice. Well, thank you guys so much. Thank you, Jacqueline, Leslie, Adam, for your honesty, your generosity today. Thank you to everyone who joined us for being willing to engage in what can feel like a very vulnerable topic. At the Family Enterprise Center, we believe there is no single right path in family business. There is only the path that aligns with your values, your relationships, and your long-term vision. If today's conversation resonated with you, I invite you to stay connected through our newsletter, our workshops, our peer groups, and our upcoming programs. We are here to create space for these conversations, the exciting ones, the strategic ones, and these difficult ones. Because at the Family Enterprise Center at KSU, we are where family businesses belong.